All right. Hi. Welcome. This is the first session of PhD Unlimited, which is part of the UC Davis Humanities Institute's efforts to do professional development for career futures, a variety of career futures in the arts and humanities. So thank you for joining. Hi. All right. I'm going to give a brief presentation today about publicly engaged research and then do a deeper dive into the Mellon Public Scholars Program. And that's on the agenda. And for anyone here, know that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DHI's YouTube page, which has a lot of our events on it from previous years. All right, so today's agenda is just to welcome folks for this session. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the PhD Unlimited series and share some upcoming workshops. And then we'll have a conversation about publicly engaged research as graduate students in the humanities, arts, and humanistic social sciences, really a very broad kind of overview for ideally oriented for someone who's new to this work to help figure out what does this work mean? How do I get started? And what are some resources that would be available to me if I wanted to learn more about it? I'll explore in a lot more detail about the Mellon Public Scholars Program and answer any questions you might have about it. So hi, my name is Stephanie Maroney, and I'm the program manager for the Mellon Public Scholars Program at the UC Davis Humanities Institute. I received my PhD in cultural studies from UC Davis in 2018, and I was also a Mellon Public Scholar in the inaugural cohort of the program in 2016. So I'm really thrilled and honored to be able to be the program manager for this program that I feel so strongly about and have been able to participate in several different ways. I've been the program manager since 2018, so I'm also hopefully a good resource for folks who are interested in the program and have questions about it. And that also means that I've co-taught the seminar in the spring and have administered really all components of the program. If you want to learn more about the DHI, you can visit the website, which is dhi.ucdavis.edu, or the Public Scholars website, which is publicscholars.ucdavis.edu. PhD Unlimited, which is the session you're here for, is a monthly series that we've created at the DHI that's on graduate careers, but really takes a broad approach to what professional development might look like. And we try to tailor it to the needs of master's and PhD students who are in the humanities and arts. There are some great resources across campus that are amenable to basically anyone from any discipline, and those are offered through Grad Pathways, the Institute for Professional Development there, which is through Grad Studies, as well as the Internship and Career Center, which has resources for master's, PhDs, and postdocs. So for PhD Unlimited, we really see it as kind of filling the need for a more focused, broad approach to career development, specifically for the arts and humanities PhD students and masters. So we have 4 upcoming events for the rest of the series. The next is crafting your graduate school story for employers. And we're happy to have Bethany Hopkins, who's the Senior Career Advisor at the Internship and Career Center, help students, grad scholars, people nearing graduation perhaps, come up with a process to communicate everything that you've done in your PhD, which is quite a lot, much more than just writing a dissertation, which in and of itself is many things. How do you communicate that process to an employer that is not, within the university? What kinds of things are they going to see valuable where they might not necessarily understand or care so much about the topic of your dissertation and research? They're certainly interested in all the things you've done to complete that work. So join us for that event to learn about how to kind of tell that story for different audiences. That'll be followed by a December workshop on December 14th, which is really a kind of introduction to grant writing that is geared towards humanities and arts graduate students. So we're going to actually watch a recording of last year's event, which was led by Ari Washburn in the Office of Research. And then we'll have a live Q&A session where you can ask specific questions about your projects, about grants you're interested in, with a really wonderful resource, Meg Sparling, who is also in the Office of Research, has a PhD in English, and has been employed at UC Davis working with faculty and students to help develop interdisciplinary grant proposals. So she's a wonderful resource, and we're really lucky to have her be a part of this series. In the winter quarter, we have a two-part series that's really focused on more of the practices of the humanities and absolutely about the public humanities, because we're going to do a podcasting workshop in two parts. The first of which will feature graduate students who've been through the National Humanities Council's podcasting workshop, and they're going to share back some of the tips and tricks that they've learned through that experience. And then on the February 22nd, we're going to have a hands-on workshop, and that will be the only in-person event so far in our series, because we'll actually get to use some equipment that the DHI has and learn how to start that process for making your own podcast and recording stories and learning how to share those with a broader audience. So you can go to the PhD Unlimited website. The URL is there, and register for any of these workshops, and we hope to see you there. All right, shifting gears into the topic of today's presentation is a question about what is publicly engaged research. So this might be a concept that you've run into. You've also maybe heard it called public scholarship or community engaged research or community action research. So there's lots of different words for it. There's lots of different genealogies and definitions, and certainly discipline-specific histories of publicly engaged research. And at the DHI, we're interested in understanding those methods and practices in which are rooted in the arts and humanities. But that means that there are, is a specific audience that we're interested in talking to. But at UC Davis broadly, we have lots of resources for students who want to either deepen their work if they already have a community engaged research practice, or who are new to it and want to learn more. One of which is the UC Davis Office of Public Scholarship and Engagement. It's been around for a few years now, but it is a newer office, and they have come to serve our wider campus, and they've primarily focused so far on faculty research, development, and support around publicly engaged research, but there are opportunities for grad students to get involved as well. So I'm going to start with some definitions from some different groups that are associated either with UC Davis or with the arts and humanities as a way to help give a sense of this broad view of what this work might be, depending on where you're situated. So at the Office of Public Scholarship and Engagement, they see public scholarship as being broad and inclusive of different forms of scholarship that vary by discipline and types of scholarly activity. It's very broad. Public scholarship for them exemplifies excellence in research, teaching, and creative practice that focuses on issues of public concern. It is useful to and developed with diverse audiences beyond the university. So in this definition, we see a real effort to connect it to the mission of UC Davis, of public land grant institutions, and think about the way that it might be incorporated into how faculty in particular articulate their work and are evaluated around tenure and promotion. Which leads us to the next definition from Imagining America, which is a national organization, but is based here at UC Davis. So we are fortunate to have IA as a part of the UC Davis community, although they serve a national consortium of artists, activists, community organizers, researchers, designers, and other kinds of scholars who are engaged in public life. They wrote within, I would say, the last 8 years, a publication on tenure and promotion review that helps to define public engagement in research. And they use this definition, which is widely cited in other sources as well. They write, publicly engaged academic work is scholarly or creative activity integral to a scholar's academic area. It encompasses different forms of making knowledge about, for, and with diverse publics and communities. Through a coherent, purposeful sequence of activities, it contributes to the public good and yields artifacts of public and intellectual value. So there's a lot of emphasis in this one on being connected somehow to an academic research area, but really moving beyond that and in service of other publics, and ultimately producing some kind of, knowledge, resource, or practice that serves the public good. Another organization that we look to here at the DHI is the National Humanities Alliance. And they have recently taken a great interest in public scholarship for arts and humanities scholars. And they've defined the publicly engaged research in this way. Engaged research, often referred to as community-based, participatory, or action research, involves collaboration between higher education faculty and students and community members that creates knowledge. So a much bigger, broader definition here can encompass any kind of thing, really, but the focus here is about bringing together communities and researchers, which might be students or faculty or others, to kind of create something that they've broadly called knowledge. Finally, we are really fortunate at UC Davis to have a number of departments where community engagement is really baked into the curriculum, or community engagement comes out of genealogies of activism and organizing that are key to the fields themselves, based on ongoing struggles for representation within the university, such as queer and gender studies, Native American studies, Asian American studies, Chicanx studies, and various other departments, including African and African American studies here at UC Davis, that have really been born out of community-based struggles for representation within higher education. So for the example here, I've chosen some of the language that comes from the website of the UC Davis Native American Studies Department, in which they address publicly engaged research. They write, "We conceive and practice the humanities and social sciences as integrated enterprises for fostering creativity in diversity, social justice, and cultural democracy. We have a commitment to scholarly rigor, theoretical clarity, and critical creative pedagogy, and we recognize our responsibility to the Native American and Indigenous communities to whom we are accountable." So in this definition, you see a real attention to specific communities where it's not just framed as a collaboration, although that is obviously very important, but it's about accountability and responsibility, and ultimately about respect between different forms of knowledge creation. So I offer these examples just as a way for anyone watching this now to reflect on how they see their relationship to publicly engaged scholarship. At the university, so many of us are within specific disciplines, or even in interdisciplinary programs, we take particular approaches or draw from kinds of theories and intellectual genealogies of our research. And so any of these definitions might just make more sense with the kinds of scholars we are, the kinds of communities we are working with, and the kinds of work we want to do together in the world. What does publicly engaged work look like? Again, it's going to be, it depends, a very broad answer here. But publicly engaged work, it really can look like many different things. And it can importantly take on overlapping forms within a single project. And it will change over time, which is very important to keep in mind, that there is really no one definition of what this work looks like. And that change is actually very important, because the change in the kind of project that you do and the kind of way that project manifests is really going to be dependent upon the needs of the community that you're working with, but also the needs of the scholar herself. So we might do different kinds of work depending on our capacities and our resources. It's can be a challenge to do this work as a graduate student when you might not have the resources available to you, or you might be facing other kinds of constraints on your own capacities, such as taking your qualifying exams, or trying to finish writing your dissertation. And so we need to be gentle with ourselves and understand that the work can really look like different things depending on the community needs and the needs of ourselves as scholars. In addition to the capacities and resources we might have, the relationships are very important. As relationships deepen with our community partners, we might pursue new kinds of engagement that would not have been appropriate when just starting out, or feasible. And it's okay to think of a long view or take a longer kind of time frame to imagine a community engaged research project, because as we've learned and as the kind of field has told us around this work, so-called drop-in projects where a scholar may just enter a complicated community context with an effort to help or provide knowledge of some kind, is usually very disruptive to that community dynamic and the work that they were meaning to achieve. So at the DHI and within the program of Mellon Public Scholars, we certainly don't support a kind of drop-in research. And we much prefer that students feel connected already to the communities that they want to serve, or if that's not possible, they have a lot of pre-work, pre-framing, pre-mentorship that happens before that work is carried out. But in the broader scope of humanities engaged research, the National Humanities Alliance has a program called Humanities for All. And within that, they've compiled this really great database of projects. So if you are someone in the arts and humanities who wants to see a variety of examples of this kind of work, I encourage you to look at the Humanities for All database of projects. Within that, they've done an analysis of all these projects, and they've been able to pull out some kind of common threads or themes or components that they've identified within this broader picture of humanities public engagement projects. And so I'll just explore those now, again, to give you a sense of a little more specifics of what these projects could be. So they've classified these projects as ones of outreach. So this might be scholarly programming or media that really is the scholar's research, but is presented in a way that a general audience might find interesting or want to learn more about. And so this might be a website, that you create, or a trade book for maybe a more advanced scholar who is trying to articulate in new ways and for new audiences the kind of academic research that they do. It could also be a media, meaning a documentary or a film or, I don't know, a TikTok channel where you're focusing on bits of your research that you think are of public interest and a general audience would be interested in learning more about. This could also take the form of engaged public programming. So this could be, specific programming that is designed for the explicit objective, not just, it says, to transfer knowledge. So to say, this is what I researched, don't you think it's interesting? But actually to cultivate an exchange between the facilitators and the participants around a shared topic. And so I find that a lot of times this kind of work takes place at the university in a space like the Humanities Institute, but also beyond it, in our public libraries, in our community centers, in different archives, and in other kinds of arts and cultural spaces where scholars and researchers can play a really important role in communicating and developing the platforms for that exchange of ideas, and not just a sharing out, but an actual building of a community of interest. Engaged research is a little different because it's actually research initiatives that are co-created by faculty, students, other folks representing the institution, and community members. So it's not that you as a researcher, you have a project that you think might be interesting to community members, but actually it involves quite a lot of pre-communication to find that research area that is mutually beneficial and then is carried out together, collectively. There's also engaged teaching, which is, I think, hugely important. It's something we also do in the Mellon Public Scholars Program through our spring seminar. And that could be instruction within the higher education context that involves engaged research as a part of the class dynamic, maybe where students are carrying out work, or where the teaching itself is focused on how one might do or carry out publicly engaged research, or where teaching is incorporated or is supplemented by a kind of public programming presence. And finally, there is the infrastructure of engagement itself, where we're talking about scales of institutional structures, creating offices, institutes, programs, departments, where public engagement is really at the center of what they do. So these are some examples that I hope are helpful, and you can think about one or the other that might be more applicable to the work you want to do or where you see your engagement efforts advancing in the future. If you are a UC Davis graduate student and you're interested in doing publicly engaged work, here are just some ideas to get you going, some places to look and do some more research. First place is to start within your own department. And that's not that you might have resources there, but it's a good place to start because you never really know what's there until you start to look. So one example would be various coursework. So in some departments, a community engaged research class is kind of a part of their core coursework that all students take, for example, Native American Studies. But in many, many others, that is really not the case. Although you might find a class or two that are offered based on the research interests or areas of a particular faculty mentor. And so I encourage everyone to get to know the faculty in your department, understand a little bit about the research they do, and see if there's some coursework that might be interesting to you. And of course, go beyond your own department if that's not the case. There's also colloquium series that are offered by many different departments on campus. And I have seen a shift to including other kinds of scholars in those series. So I'm seeing more and more that departments are inviting publicly engaged scholars to talk about their work, or in some cases, inviting scholars and their community partners to share about the work that they've done together. And those can be great learning spaces to open up new ideas to you or new community members, if that's an area you're interested in, that might be interested in working with you too. And finally, faculty mentorship is really, really important here. And I want to acknowledge that it can also be a challenge for a lot of graduate students. So if you want to engage in this work, it is very helpful to have faculty support in that effort. And if you don't know where to start with that, I encourage you to go to the Public Scholars website and look at the different faculty mentors that have worked with our graduate public scholars in the past. Because through that, you can actually kind of get a quick look at faculty members across the university, not only arts and humanities faculty, who support publicly engaged research and probably have their own active research agendas as well. There are some broader campus resources. I already mentioned Imagining America and the Office of Public Scholarship and Engagement. In red, there is the URL iagathering.org, and they're actually going to have their national gathering on October 21st and 22nd, so Thursday and Friday of this week, and you can see some great examples there. You can register directly on the website. I believe it's free for UC Davis students. And if you wanted to learn more about our program, the Mellon Public Scholars are doing a roundtable talk at 11:15 on Friday, October 22nd, about the affective work of public scholarship. There's also other institutes listed here in that second bullet point, including the Center for Community and Citizen Science, the Feminist Research Institute, and the Center for Regional Change. As a third point, there are some regional opportunities that might be of interest to some of you. There's the Davis Putter Scholarship Fund that is specifically for student activism. The American Council of Learned Society, the ACLS, is offering an Emerging Voices post-PhD, so a kind of postdoc that is interested in very expansive ideas of scholarship. California Humanities, our statewide humanities programs or efforts to provide new funding for scholars, has a Humanities for All program that provides small, quick grants to people doing community engaged research. And finally, within the city of Davis itself, they have a small community arts grants fund that I know some public scholars have been able to achieve by working very closely with local community organizations. And finally, the UC Davis Humanities Institute itself, of course. So PhD Unlimited, while not exclusively about publicly engaged research, we do often, such as this workshop, offer tips and tricks and background information around the topic, as well as our podcasting series coming up in winter that is really about practices in the public humanities. And our keystone program here is the Mellon Public Scholars Program, which I'm going to talk about in more detail now for folks who are interested. So the Mellon Public Scholars Program is funded by the Andrew Mellon Foundation, hence the name. The initial award funded 3 years of programming, and we are in a second round of funding, which is actually wrapping up with this final cohort. So it is a public humanities program that is combining the research-oriented goals of public scholarship, but also professional development opportunities for graduate students. So we really try to put those things together through the program. We have over 60 alumni that are now in and beyond UC Davis. The program itself includes several components. The first is the selection, meaning you have to apply with a project. Everyone accepted into the program is enrolled in a seminar in spring where we explore in much greater detail the kind of theories and practices of public scholarship in the arts and humanities, and then give you some workshop time to really hem out the details of your own project before you carry it out. You have the assistance of a faculty mentor who is there to help be a liaison or be just a sounding board as things come up over the summer. And then very importantly, you have a community partner. You have someone that you're working with to carry out this mutually beneficial summer project, which happens over the summer months. And then at the end, you're invited in the fall to be a part of a showcase where you share back about the work that you've done with your community partner. Each fellow receives $7,500 in the summer and also has an additional $400 available to them for supplemental project funds as they come up. So this might be reimbursing you for travel that was required for the project, or providing a small stipend to invited guests or distinguished speakers that need to be a part of the project itself. The call for proposals will open on November 10th. So it is not yet available, although if you go to the website, you can see previous years' calls for proposals to get a broad sense of it. The proposals themselves for the 2022 cohort will be due on January 14th. For eligibility and then details of your application, the program is open to doctoral and MFA students in the arts, humanities, and humanistic social sciences at any stage of their graduate training. So the program is really meant to cultivate interest and support in publicly engaged scholarship, whether you are just starting out or whether you're kind of at the end of your program. In either case, though, it is important to have a well-formed project, although we wouldn't restrict it just to, for example, people post-qualifying exams. So it's open to people at any stage. The proposed project's relevance to the arts and humanities is very important here. We see a lot of really wonderful projects, but they aren't necessarily connected to the kinds of theories, practices, methods, or questions that are central to the humanities and the arts. So for this program, that is important. But anyone with an interest in public scholarship and community engaged research is encouraged to apply. It does not have to be explicit to your dissertation research, although I will say your proposal is often helped if you have done some research in a particular area and want to see this project as maybe an extension of the research that you've already begun. In terms of what you have to submit, that's a CV and a proposal narrative. The narrative is a maximum of 3 pages, and it addresses several different things that are a part of a rubric, which will be available to review on the Public Scholars website. But broadly, you're being asked to address your interest in the program and your ability to plan and carry out an intellectually grounded, mutually beneficial arts or humanity-based projects with an identified community partner. There's 2 categories of projects that we support through Mellon Public Scholars. The first are original projects, meaning that it is of your own research, it's of your own mind, it's your own community that you're bringing in. Or you could apply to a pre-established project. And this means that it's a community partner that the Davis Humanities Institute already has. And the project is pretty detailed in terms of what you're going to apply to directly. Those projects, we will know more about them when the call for proposals comes out in mid-November, so stay tuned for that. Either way, the estimated time commitment on these projects is about 20 hours a week for 10 weeks, so similar to if you had a TA-ship or a GSR appointment. Students can apply to both or either of those tracks, but please submit a separate application to them. Please contact me if you have any questions rather than any host organization, meaning our pre-established partners. If you are applying for an original project with a community partner, I encourage you to reach out to them before submitting your application, just to make sure that the project is desired and needed by that community organization and would be supported over the summer. For an example of the different original projects, I think this really exemplifies the range of projects that could be considered publicly engaged arts and humanities work. So this is just a sampling of scholars, their departments, and the titles of their research projects, but I've bolded a sense of what the project is about. So for example, in the first project, the work itself was about building community, building alliances among different groups. So a kind of movement building, community building project definitely counts as publicly engaged research in this program. You might create a digital archive or collect stories or find a platform with which to share stories. You might do a circus workshop, as in the case of Ante in performance studies. You might kind of create a community-based archive or work with an existing community organization to make their archives accessible to a broader audience. There are projects that collect narratives and share those narratives in new and interesting ways that tie digital story to mapping projects using really neat software that allows those things to kind of lay on top of one another. There's a lot of history, storytelling, and for example, development of different curriculum and pedagogy. So there is Crystal Richardson's project, which is developing a culturally responsive Karuk language curriculum development. And we've seen other projects that are about creating a range of pedagogical tools that are about preserving, sharing, and ultimately serving some kind of a teaching effect based on the work that was carried out. So the work has been very broad, and I want to just encourage you to think about how your own work might fit into some of these different methods and practices. There's more examples available. The real benefit, I think, of moving online is that last year's 2020 and this year's 2021 Public Scholars Showcases will be virtual or have been virtual. So if you go to the Public Scholars website and look for the 2020 Project Showcase, you can see short videos by all of those scholars about the work that they carried out over the summer. And then you'll be able to see the 2021 Scholar Projects on November 17th on the Public Scholars website. So that's another great resource to learn a little bit more about what these projects look like and what kind of work gets carried out within the program itself. In terms of evaluation and selection for the projects, we have some different criteria. It's probably 85% the same across our pre-established projects where the DHI is working with one of our community partners versus original projects that are brought by the students themselves based on their community interest and needs. And you can see them laid out here. We are seeking projects that are proposals that communicate the impact and value of the applicant's experience for their community partner. We also are really interested in learning about the applicant's potential to carry out the work, to execute the community engaged work, which could be expressed as a desire to do so or an existing track record in carrying out that work. It's important to address the intellectual foundation of the project and its significance to the humanities and arts. And finally, it's very important that each project address the contribution to the university's commitment to diversity, which might make a form as service, as research, or as one's own perspective in the work that they do. The only exception for original projects is that there's an additional criteria about the feasibility and appropriateness of the proposed work. So we encourage you to submit a kind of work plan, a timeline to help reviewers better understand how the project will be carried out, as well as dissemination and access plans for when the project is completed or when it's nearing completion. I'm really excited. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take those. But in the meantime, I'm going to share some more common questions that I've received through the several years of running this program in the hopes that these might be one of yours already. The first, can I propose an international project? Yes, absolutely. International projects are welcome, as well as proposals from international students. So just taking a moment to acknowledge that some international students don't always have access to all of the graduate funding opportunities on campus, and just being very clear that this is not that. And we really invite proposals on international projects and with international students. Um, can I use this award to fund my dissertation fieldwork? Maybe. So the project that you propose can be related to your dissertation, but it's very important that it be discrete and different from the core of the dissertation itself. The DHI does offer other kind of summer research grants that are meant to support dissertation fieldwork or research that needs to be carried out in the completion of a dissertation, but this is not one of those programs. We really want to support students who are trying to expand what they're doing or who are really centering community engagement rather than centering a dissertation that might have a component of community engagement. So it's a simple but complicated differentiation. And if you ever have a question about, is this just my dissertation work or is this something else, I'm happy to read a proposal or answer a question to help you distinguish that. Do I need to have already worked with this community partner? No, we definitely welcome projects that are new partnerships or existing ones, but it is always good to be able to communicate that there is already a kind of relationship or a trust or at least a willingness to work with one another so that we know that the project really is of mutual interest. I'm a social scientist who uses quantitative methods. Can I apply? Again, maybe. The projects need to center the arts and humanities queries and methods per our funder, the Mellon Foundation. But that doesn't mean that a social scientist couldn't carry out such a project. So again, if you have a question about where that line might fall, feel free to ask or share your work with me. What if I've never done this kind of work? Apply. I really invite proposals from students who have a desire but not a lot of experience in public scholarship. We provide quite a bit of training through the spring seminar and mentorship with myself and a faculty member to help you carry out that work. So if you're new to this, don't think that it isn't for you. The program really can support you in a lot of ways. Do you provide financial support to community partners? So not directly. Each scholar in this program receives a generous support, $7,500, but they also have access to the supplemental funds that could be used to pay honorarium or other such expenses for community partners, but we do not fund them financially directly. Do I have to take the spring seminar? Yes, you have to take the spring seminar. Sorry to folks who are well beyond that stage of their graduate education. It is a required part of the program, and I find that it's very, very useful. So even if you are at the end of your graduate degree and you're like, I don't want to take another seminar, the interdisciplinary cohort that gets created through this program, it's just a wonderful group of people, and it's been a very supportive place that I've seen for previous cohorts. So keep that in mind. So I'm happy to help. I'm here to help. It's part of my role as Public Scholars Program Manager. I'm available to meet and discuss any ideas if you want to apply to the program. I can read a draft of your proposal, or I can connect you to previous Mellon Public Scholars if you wanted to reach out and talk more about their work, or if you see an overlap between projects. Again, the call for proposals will be available on November 10th, but you can go to the website in the meantime and get a better sense of the program there. And the proposal will be due on January 14th of 2022. That's all I have planned for today. I hope it's been a useful overview of how to think about publicly engaged research within the arts and humanities, some resources that are available to you here at UC Davis, and then specifically a program that is really meant to cultivate and support public scholars as graduate students doing the work that they want to do and hopefully transforming the institution itself. So thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this time and answer any questions that you might have.